what the class proceedings are. So accordingly, we will start the spinal cord. Now, spinal cord is one of the part of the CNS. So the bottom part, or we can also write it this way, the part below the brain. Part of what? Of the CNS, that is the cerebral nervous system. That is spinal cord. So if we have to draw and show where exactly is the spinal cord present in respect to the brain, something like this you need to draw. So suppose this is the brain, fine. And as I said in the definition, the part below. So if this be, say for example, the brainstem, the pons, the medulla, all the stuff. The medulla, suppose this bottommost part be considered as the medulla. Bottommost part means the bottommost part of the brain be considered as the medulla oblongata. This medulla oblongata continues downward into a cord kind of structure. And that cord kind of structure entirely is known as spinal cord. And this cord ends abruptly into a cone shape. Okay, we call this cone shape as conus medullaris. Did you understand what is conus? Do you understand this concept? What the conus is? Conus is the terminal part. Terminal bottommost part of the spinal cord. Conus medullaris. Okay. Basically, what happens, as with the brain, we have learned that the brain is guarded all around by the cranial cavity. So with a different color, if I show this cranial cavity that is guarding the brain, the biggest opening of the skull is known as what? The foramen magnum. We know this. Foramen magnum, that is the biggest opening. The location of the foramen magnum is towards the base of the skull, right? So the spinal cord extends from the level of the foramen magnum till the conus medullaris, that is true. But what bony structure is present below the skull that guards the spinal cord? The bony structure present below the skull, obviously it is the vertebral column, right? So if this be the body of vertebra, each vertebra do have a kind of ring-like structure present that is called the vertebral arch. I do not remember whether I have taught you the structure of individual vertebrae separately, but do remember that each individual vertebra do have an arch at its back. Okay. If possible in this class or in some other class, do remind me to show you the structure of a single vertebra. In that, I will tell you even more details of this vertebral arch. The discussion of vertebral arch is beyond the scope of the present discussion. As of now, just what I can show you is that the vertebra consists of two parts. Each vertebra consists of two parts. One is this body, another is this arch. And this arch contains a hollow space in between. Okay, so this blue dots are the locations where I'm representing this hollow. So this is a hollow space. Right? So what we can consider, this is a ring. A ring is having a hollow and grounded and bounded by the periphery of that ring. So if I place another vertebrae on the one that I have shown, what happens to this ring kind of structure? One ring placed over another. Understanding? So if you place one ring on top of another, don't you form a hollow canal? You form that hollow canal, right? And that canal is termed as the canal formed by this vertebrae. So I'm drawing the next vertebrae just below the one that I've shown. And I'm trying to show you again the arch to give you the idea of the formation of the canal. Now, this entire structure is the vertebral column. That is true. Now, in this entire structure that we call the vertebral column, these arches, when placed on top of another, they form a long hollow canal, and that hollow canal is to be termed as the vertebral canal. Understood? What is vertebral canal? So see, in the lessons on vertebral column, we have taken a note that this individual vertebrae can be named, right? Based on the regions in which they are present. So the vertebrae just present below the skull is to be termed as what? The C1 vertebra, right? Accordingly, the other vertebrae can be termed as C1 to C7 and thereafter T1 to T12. And we would continue until we reach something called the CO4. That is the fourth cervical vertebra. This is how the entire column and the canal is formed, right?
Sir, what T1?
C1, C stands for cervical. So in
No,
this
sir,
neck
T1.
area, T1.
Yes, sir.
T is
T1.
thoracic. That is in the thorax area. In the chest area, we are having thoracic. Below the thoracic, we are having the lumbar. Again, below the lumbar, we are having the sacrum. And the last segment below the sacrum is the coccygeal segment. So for that, we are having the CO. And the last of the CO is the C4. Clear? Now, if we follow this vertebra downwards, if these be the T1 and all that stuff, the level at which this conus medullaris is to be found, that is the end part of the spinal cord, that level matches with something that can be termed as L2. So L2 stands for what? The second lumbar vertebra. So at the level of the second lumbar vertebra, the spinal cord ends. And the end part of the spinal cord is gradually tapered or tapered. That means gradually narrowed down to a particular point, taking the shape of a cone, and the name of that cone is the conus medullaris. So if you are asked the extent of the spinal cord, you would definitely refer to this, that it starts from the level of what? The foramen magnum. And it ends at the level of what? The L2. Okay. Now, the vertebral column is extended even below this level. I mean, with the same color, if I have to show the vertebral column, so after the L2, there will be L3, there will be L4, L5, and accordingly at the end, as I've already shown below, there further would be, so I would now erase it out here, and at the bottommost part, you will be having the coccygeal fourth vertebra, right? So what does it mean is that there is an empty space. Let me pick another color to show you that empty space that is present even below where the spinal cord ends. Spinal cord is ending at the conus medullaris. Below the conus medullaris, there is a part where the spinal cord is not present anymore. But the two structures that are present, let me name those two structures present out here. One structure is known as cauda equina. I will explain what is cauda equina, and I will show you also what is cauda equina. Another structure that is present is phylum terminal. Now, one by one, I'm going to explain how are these two structures present in this part of the vertebral canal. I mean, the part which the spinal cord occupies of the vertebral canal, this particular part is actually two-third length of the vertebral canal. Understood? This is the two-third length of the vertebral canal. And the remaining one-third, so I'm speaking now of this particular part, that remaining one-third. So to demonstrate this, let me show you the further continuation of the vertebral column, inside which these two structures, the cauda equina and the phylum terminal, are present. So first comes the explanation of cauda equina. Cauda means what? Cauda means tail. What does it mean? Tail. And equina means horse. So basically it means like a horse's tail. Ghoda ledge, Bengal. So how does this horse's tail looks like? I mean, there is a point from which multiple filaments actually comes up, right? A bunch of fibers. Now the fibers that we have in the cauda equina are obviously nerve fibers, quite naturally. We would call it still as the nerve, not as the tracts, because the spinal cord is ending at the conus medullaris though, but the nerves from the last segments of the spinal cord do hang and form a cluster. Are you noticing how I have drawn this? So here is a cluster of fibers, just giving the appearance of the tail of a horse. So the cauda equina basically refers to this appearance, having the tail of an horse. I will show you both a kind of a drawn diagram, I mean, drawn by the medical artist, so as to give you a clear concept, as well as I will also show you a prosected or a dissected image in which you will come to know how the cauda equina is present. Okay, understood now. What is cauda equina? Well, now if we look into this cauda equina, at the center, we will find a structure that I will better demonstrate with help of a different color. Let me pick the red color. So at the center, I will find something that is called the phylum terminal. That is the another name that I've written. I'm showing that at the center, what I can show you is the phylum terminal. Now, what is phylum terminal? Cauda equina, I think you have understood that it is a bunch of nerve fibers that is hanging down below the end part of the spinal cord. Now, which structure do give rise to this phylum terminal? Basically, in the lessons of the brain, I don't know whether I've discussed or not, but get the discussion right now, that what I am showing you outside is the skull, right? And in the blue color, I'm showing you what? The brain. But present around the brain, I can consider that there is a layer. As of now, I'm speaking of this as a single layer, but in reality, this consists of 3 layers. And these layers are known as, the one word for this all layers together is meninges. Right. And these layers are basically even continuous downward. So let me show you how are they continuous. They are so continuous, they are covering the outer surfaces of the spinal cord, and they are continuing even below the end of the spinal cord. So the end of the spinal cord is the conus medullaris, and even below the end of the spinal cord, this meninges continues downwards as a single small slender fiber, not a nerve fiber, but a fiber made up of the connective tissues of the meninges. And that single long slender fiber is termed as a filum terminal. Did you now understand what the filum terminal is? These are the extensions of the meninges below the conus.
Sir, then phylum terminals and coda equina are same, both are same.
Not at all. Filum terminal are continuations of meninges. If you look into this diagram again, I think it will be helpful. See, in the red color, I have shown you the meninges, which is covering up both the brain and the spinal cord. And the covering of the meninges is extending below the level where the spinal cord is ending. Spinal cord is ending at the L2 level. And the structure at which the spinal cord is ending is the conus. But the covering of the spinal cord, that is the meningeal coverings, are extended below the level of the conus. So final terminal is an extended meningeal layer. We can say it that way. But the cauda equina is a bundle of nerve. Meninges are basically made up of connective tissues, and the nerves are made up of neurons. So in filum terminal, you do not have any neurons. Rather, you have the connective tissues that form the meningeal layers. But in cauda equina, you do have neurons, which are conductive tissues, which do contribute to even some nerve plexuses. I mean, the cauda equina, the nerves that are forming the cauda equina actually leave this entire columnar structure. I mean, this entire columnar structure or the canal, the vertebral canal is left by the spinal cord. I mean, the spinal nerves. Did you understand the difference? Cauda equina is made up of nerves, but the filum terminal is made up of a meningeal extension. Is your question answered, Priyanka?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as I was showing in the diagram, probably I've noticed that the width of the spinal cord is a kind of a like pen long thing, prolonged. Now this width of this pen is same throughout. The diameter of the pen is same throughout, right? But when you look into the spinal cord, though it is a cord-like structure, vertically arranged, almost vertically arranged structure, but there are certain areas of the spinal cord which are relatively more thick. And there are even areas of the spinal cord which are relatively not that thick. We call these thicknesses as what? As I will write the name out here, because one such thickness is present in this location. That is known as the enlargement. So here is the region of what? Is the cervical region below the skull. So this particular enlargement is known as cervical enlargement. Accordingly, if we move down, we will find that this has, you will probably notice in the diagram also I'm trying to show, that there is a narrow area. This is the narrowed one. But if you look into this area, you would find that there is again an enlargement. So these are known as the lumbar enlargement, because this is present in the lumbar area. I mean, if this be the L2, then we can't not write that this is thus the L1. So in the presence, at the L2, it is ending. So just below its ending, there is another enlargement, and that enlargement is known as the lumbar enlargement. Why are these areas enlarged? Because these are the areas which is giving out nerves to the extremities. The cervical enlargement contributes to a network of nerves that is known as brachial plexus. Similarly, this lumbar enlargement, they also give out the nerves in the form of a network, in the form of a net. I mean, in medical word, we call this net as plexus. So here we are having something called lumbar plexus, and also at the end below the lumbar we are having sacral plexus. So the density of the nerves is more in this region. So that's why the areas of the spinal cord in these particular regions are enlarged. Did you understand what is the function of the enlargements? Is it clear? Did you understand why it is enlarged? Hello?
Sir, can you repeat again?
Okay. Suppose say in a particular location, you are having few numbers of anything. Okay. Say for example, you are having few numbers of pens, right? Now, if say the number of pens be 10 pens are occupying in one area. If you add additional more 10 pens, would not that area expand? Would not that area enlarge? So that means what? If there be more amount of nerves, that means there would be an enlargement. Now, the enlargement that I was speaking of, present in the spinal cord, these enlargement and the areas where from additional amounts of nerves emerge. Why do the additional amounts of nerves emerge? Consider this human trunk. This is one area, the extremities are present. The arms, the root of the arms are present. Below this, again, when there is the leg area, there is another area where the additional amount of nerves are required to control the movements of the legs. Right. Now, since there are two areas where additional amount of nerves are required because there are additional movements to control, additional muscles to stimulate for contraction. So the number of the nerves in two areas would obviously be more. And if more number of nerves be present, the result is the area would be enlarged. Understood now? Now, since one such enlargement is present in the cervical area means not exactly at the bottom of the skull. I mean, in the cervical segment, we are having a total of 7 cervical vertebrae and 8 spinal segments, cervical spinal. Of that, basically, it is stretched between C4 to T1. Have you seen that I have written? Cervical enlargement is present in between C4 to T1 segments. That is the 4th cervical segment to the 1st thoracic segment. This is the stretch. I mean, if this entire thing with the spinal cord, this one area would be having an enlargement. So the area would be demarcated by its upper and the lower end. Upper end is the level where the C4 vertebrae is present, and lower end is the area where the T1 vertebrae is present. So in between these two vertebrally marked areas, we are having the cervical enlargement. Clear now? Because from this, additional nerves would come out on both the sides so as to control the movements of the upper extremities. Clear? Now, similarly, if you look into this lumbar plexus originating from the lumbar enlargement, so in the bottom part, there is again a definitive area, and that definitive area is between T11 to L1. So T11 to L1, that means the 11th thoracic vertebra to the first lumbar vertebra. It is in this stretch that the enlargement is present. Just below the L1, we already know what is going to happen. Just below the L1 will be the L2. And at the level of the L2, you will have the end of the spinal cord, that is in the conus. So just before the spinal cord ends in the conus, we have the enlargement called the lumbar enlargement. Why is the lumbar enlargement be there? Because of additional nerves. And the additional nerves outside the vertebral canal forms the lumbar plexus. If this concept be not clear, let me explain it out here in this diagram. What in the diagram you are seeing are, in this magenta color, you are seeing the VC, the vertebral canal, right? This is vertebral canal. Let me then change the colors. This is the vertebral canal. In the red color, what you are seeing is the meninges. And in the blue color, what you are seeing is the spinal cord, right? Now, the nerves that I have shown in the cordon equina is with this color. With that same color, I can show that the nerves, see, I am showing that the nerves are basically originating and coming out of the, what is this? The vertebral column. So if this area represents the bone, so this is the bony vertebral column. In the gap between the bony vertebral column, nerves are coming out on both the sides, on the right side as well as on the left side. And these nerves are what? These are the spinal nerves. We know that there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and the spinal nerves are originating from the spinal cord, but are leaving the entire vertebral column to get distributed to the different parts of the body, which the spinal nerves are either supposed to control or are either supposed to receive sensory information from. Understood? So the spinal nerves that I'm showing you is occurring in the 31 pairs. Clear? Now, in the area where the lumbar enlargement is present, the spinal nerves that emerge out, outside the vertebral column, it forms the plexus. That means it forms a network, jaleর মতন তৈরি করে, network of nerves. Right. So that's why we call this plexus as the lumbar and the sacral plexus, L and S plexus. Similarly, we will also have, not can, but we will rather also have nerves originating from the cervical segments of the spinal cords and leaving the vertebral column. That again is shown here in the magenta color. So this is the vertebral column shown. It will leave the vertebral column. As it leaves the vertebral column, these nerves form the, what they form? They form the cervical plexus. Understood the concept of plexus? So the concept of plexus means that they are having additional nerves so as to control the movements and the contractions of the upper and the lower extremities, the upper and the lower limbs. And having that additional nerves present in this particular area, what we need to follow is that these areas are more enlarged. We are having one enlarged at the cervical area, another enlargement near the lumbar area. Accordingly, the names are the cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement. The stretch of the cervical enlargement is from the C4 to the T1, that is the fourth cervical vertebra to the first thoracic vertebra. And accordingly, the stretch of the lumbar vertebra is from T1 to L2. That is what I have written here. T1 to L1. Sorry, L2 is where the spinal cord would end, and L1 is where the lumbar enlargement would end. Have a check on the concept and confirm whether you have understood or not. And meanwhile, I will record the attendance. I think, as I can see, only 3 students are present, right? Oh, what is the date today? Today is the 6th, right? I have missed it. Priyanka, Shayan, and there was probably another student present. What is your role, Priyanka?
11.
11. Okay. I have marked you as present. Shayan is 12. I have also seen Shayan's name in the register. And there probably was another student. Who is
Yes,
that?
sir, Niyaz.
Niyaz. What is the role of Niyaz? Niyaz has kept
Sir, it's 21, sir.
21. Okay. So I have marked the attendance of only these 3 candidates. If I find other candidates joining in the next session, then I can think of marking them as present too. But they should ideally be not present because they didn't attend the first session. Okay, I think you are looking into the board and raising whatever issues are there in understanding the basics before I take
Yes.
you to some other details of the spinal cord. Yes.
Sir, this specific spinal nerve, in
Mhm.
case of spinal nerve 31 nerve, have
Mhm.
any specific name of this 31?
No.
I mean, how could
They-
I understand this is spinal nerve?
They are, I think that was the topic of one class of mine, that they are identified by numbers and the segments. Okay, in one of my recording, you will find it. How are they numbered? They are numbered based on the level of the vertebra to which each segments are corresponding. I mean, there are 31 pairs. Of these 31 pairs, 8 belongs to the cervical spinal segments. So the individual nerves would be named as simply C1 spinal nerve. That is the first cervical spinal nerve. Accordingly, C2, that represents the first cervical spinal, sorry, the second cervical spinal nerve. Understanding? So they are identified by numbers as well as the alphabets before the numbers, they represent the segments. And this thing represents the numeral order starting from the top.
আর স্যার এই নার্ভগুলো হাফ হচ্ছে সেন্সরি নার্ভ হিসাবে আর হাফ মোটর নার্ভ হিসাবে কাজ করে।
না না, নার্ভগুলো মোস্টলি মিক্সড। মানে এই নার্ভগুলোর মধ্যে এরম ফাইবারসও আছে যেগুলোতে সেন্সরি সেন্সেশনস ক্যারি করে, আবার এরম ফাইবারসও আছে যার মধ্যে মোটর ইম্পালসেসও ক্যারি করে, মানে যার মধ্যে দিয়ে we can have the control on muscular contractions. Mostly these nerves are mixed. যেমন ব্রেনের ক্ষেত্রে, I mean the cranial nerves, we had purely sensory nerves or we had some nerves purely motor, but for the spinal cord of the nerve, that is the spinal nerves, most of the nerves are usually mixed nerves. Clear? Now see, the less than 1 minute is left, and I will take 5 minutes of time in between so that I can convert this recording and can make it ready for upload. But you will not get the upload today. You will get the upload tomorrow rather. Because I mean, if many person join in the next session, then I would publish it today. I would keep it uploaded, but I'm not going to publish it. I will publish it tomorrow. tomorrow after the class. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So shall I terminate the current session so as to begin a new one, so as to make the process more prompt? So I'm terminating, join me in the new session so as to gain further insights into the structure of the spinal cord. Thank you. Join me in the next session.